All right, well, the following is a broadcast of a presentation that was pre-recorded in front of an audience of 0 people. We could have presented it live, but the symposium organizers didn't quite trust us to constrain ourselves to 15 minutes, probably rightfully. In any case, we will hopefully be available at the end of this for questions if you have any. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. We're here to review some highlights from a project that we've worked on with the River Management Society, American Whitewater, and the Park Service related to creating a database, a national database of boat launches on rivers. And we'll give you about a 15-minute presentation, then you can have some questions at the end. One of my hiking buddies that I go backpacking with believes that all activity should be done deliberately, sort of at a casual pace and without any fuss. And he's sort of famous for his minimalism and efficiency at camp and doing other outdoor activities. And his whole goal in life is to be sort of minimalist and simplistic and not appear to be working too hard. And that's something that we sort of believe is true for good access points. If the biggest thing you notice about your trip is how access worked or didn't work, your trip's not probably going that well. And we sort of think that is true of access, and it's interesting to sort of think about why that might be the case. And that's what this project is a little bit about. We were trying to think critically about different kinds of access points and what elements of it work and what elements don't, and think hard about that. One way you can attack a problem of designing a good launch is to do it deductively, which is to figure out your goals and your objectives, take a look at your terrain and your constraints and things of that nature, and work out, well, how can we design a launch to do the things we want it to do? And there's a great framework for doing that and involving stakeholders that American Whitewater and the Park Service have put together. And we'll get you a link to that at the end of this presentation. But the other way to think about it is to go look at a bunch of launches and sort of critique them and take a look at which variables and their variables and their characteristics and think about how those work. And that's what this project is about. We went and collected a bunch of launches across the country, collected information about them, and then started sorting through and organizing them and seeing what we might learn from looking at that. So that's kind of what this project's about. We started off by sort of characterizing the different types of launches on a scale that's similar to the recreation opportunity spectrum, which many of you might be familiar with, that kind of arrays things on a continuum from more developed to more primitive, more facilities versus lots less. And so we created what we call the access opportunity spectrum, and then started classifying some of these launches within it. And then we also collected a lot of other information about those with some help of some volunteers that gave us some sites around the country, although our database at the moment is still a little bit heavy on the Western US and Alaska, where we live and know a lot more, and we put in some of those data points. Once we had all these data collected, we have about 270 different launches across the country. We organized them within categories and then ran some statistics, and there's a report that you can wade through and take a look at some of those 4 different categories of launches. And we won't go through that on this slideshow. Instead, we will just kind of push ahead and tell you about some of our favorites. Just to review the kinds of categories that we ran through in this database. We have over 70 variables for each launch, and it covers things like staging facilities, ramps and slides and their characteristics, parking sizes, restrooms, signage, fees, use levels, and perhaps most usefully, sort of the issues and problems at the site. So we have a kind of a list of potential problems at a site and had people rate each of those sites for those problems. So it gives you a way of sorting through these data, through these launches, to find the kind of launches that you want to learn something more about. And with that said, we'd like to tell you a little bit about how you might use it. We think the best way to use it is to, if you have a new launch coming into play, and here's an example from the Klamath River in California and Oregon that we've been working on lately. And they're going to drain some reservoirs and remove some dams, and there's going to be a need for some new access sites. And this database can help you because you can help Take a look for other sites, other access sites in the region to sort of get a feel for what those are like. Or if you know that you have some kinds of features that you're going to want at your new site. For example, in this situation, we're going to have a new access point, probably on a steep bank where there used to be a reservoir, so pretty unstable soils. We could go look for some of the types of characteristics you might expect in a very steep location, like boat slides and things like that. As another example from the same place, one of the places where they're going to remove a dam is the place that we were putting in for our study. And it's a very steep place with very limited parking. And this might be a great place to take a look at how boat slides or steep ramps might work. And the database gives you a way to sort for those kinds of access points or other examples of that, and you can take a look at them. Okay, with that said, we're going to kind of just run through a few examples of launches from the database and just kind of tongue-in-cheek give you some awards for some of the launches that we think are interesting or useful to think about. And we'll let Bo take a crack at about 5 of those, and I'll do the same.
So that acronym GBU stands for Good, Bad, and Unusual, which is the way that this project started or wound up getting titled. So these are some of our favorites in each of those categories, and mostly chosen, like Doug said, tongue-in-cheek, and just because they illustrate things that we think are interesting. So we gave this one an award of the best performance by pavement. It's Sheep Gulch in the Snake River Canyon near Jackson Hole, Wyoming. As you can see, there's lots of pavement here. And it's a great example of ways that you can solve problems by organizing, thinking through carefully about the types of use that occur and how many people show up at once and what you need to do to make that function effectively. And so here on a really busy summer day, there's enough room for multiple trips to be launching at the same time. Outfitted trips are separated from non-outfitted trips because those 2 trips have different kinds of needs and travel at different, they kind of move at different paces. There are lanes that separate those 2 big kinds of use. There are also lanes that separate each trip out. So everything here is pretty well organized, but it's an example of a high-end development. In contrast, when the city of Wilson upstream was thinking about building a ramp in their city park, one of the things they said was, don't build us one that looks like that one down there. So there are downsides to that level of development. This is a second place that we have fond memories of. This one gets the I Thought You Checked That Knot award, and it's at Boundary Creek on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. It's a place where on a rainy afternoon, actually on the predecessor to this ramp that was a little further upstream and was steeper, I and the other responsible adult looked at each other and lowered a boat down on a couple of ropes that had been spliced together, and a knot peeled open, and that boat landed on the river, oars in the water, and took off on the river trip by itself. So this is a great design that allows a fully loaded large raft like the one you see here to pull up to the top of it. You can unload it directly off a trailer onto the ramp, and you can lower it down, put it in the water, and then there's a place for boats to kind of stockpile downstream in a big eddy. It turns out that the slow point is the area above the ramp where people stage. This is yet another place. This is in Yosemite Valley in California, where we worked on a planning project for a number of years. And this launch area that you're seeing here was chosen because it was near the outfitter's warehouse where they stockpile their boats. And people would come to the outfitter's operation, rent their boat, and then they would pick it up and schlep it across the street, across some traffic, and down here. And that had problems for people carrying that stuff, also the conflicts, potential conflicts with traffic. And you can see there are some erosion problems here. The interesting solution here in the plan was to propose, and is now being implemented, a what we call a mobile warehouse, meaning that the boats are stockpiled on a truck with a big trailer, and then that truck is transported to a better location with a big gravel bar that's more resistant to erosion, and a place where the people taking boats off the truck don't have to cross traffic to get to the river. This is the What Can We Do with This Staging Area Award. This is the Dirty Devil takeout below Cataract Canyon. Calling it a formal takeout is a little bit glorified. It's a place that just was an open area that had some access. They probably were using this as a staging area when they were building a road or a bridge or something like that. And as a boat ramp, it's really well located. It's just below the moving water and it's just above a bunch of flat water. So it actually is a great place to take out. But the downside is that the ramp is really steep. It has these ball bearing kind of gravels on it that are very slick when it's dry. And you think you're going to get your four-wheel drive rig stuck down there. And when it's wet, it's even worse because there's kind of what's described as thigh-deep mud to get your boat to the shore. This one gets the They're Coming, We'd Better Build It award. This is on the Tallulah River in Georgia. It's a place where there's a dam upstream and a dam downstream of this really spectacular gorge that had been dewatered by the hydro project. But as a result of relicensing, there was a negotiation for getting flow releases here for boating. And that was a great idea. The boaters were all excited about it. And then everybody kind of looked around and said, but wait a minute, there's not a way to get people and boats down to the river at that location. So the utility, which did a little bit of an about face from being uninterested in having boaters to being a real facilitator, and to give them credit where credit's due. Over time, a trail got built, stairs, walkways, etc., that helped sort people into different categories, get them close to the water where they needed to be, and provided access to this really cool place, and handles the couple or 300 boats that arrive on a release day. And then all that, that big slug of use kind of dissipates and you're back to it being a pretty quiet place again.
Speaking of sort of furniture that occurs at access points, what's one interesting thing is to take a look at these things, boat slides. They're kind of one of the more classic built environment things that you find at these access points. And here are three of our favorites, and we'll tell you something about them. So the main slide here is it's got the synthetic decking on it, and is really slick and puts you right into an eddy in the river. What's interesting about this, of course, is that that's a pretty fast runway, and you hit what I think Bo calls it water skiing speed at the end of that thing if you hit it right, and that's especially true if you throw some water on there. Fortunately, Idaho is usually a dry place in the summer, so that's not a problem. But you want to be careful about what surface you put on those slides, because that changes the friction coefficient, which changes how fast or how much control you need over your boat. A couple of other features that are important for slides. The one on the Pere Marquette in Michigan is that being able to back your trailer and have the boat at the right level to go right onto the ramp is a really nice, clever trick, and is something that designers ought to try and do. And I particularly like this launch and slide at Hole in the Wall on the Clackamas River in Oregon, which has basically a bunch of metal railings to put on boats or to hold your hand to steady yourself. But it also allows you to use the stairs around it to control the boat, no matter what size it is. So it kind of fits kayaks, it fits catarafts, it fits rafts, and lets people kind of control the boat as it's going down the hill. The award that we're calling Advanced to Boardwalks refers to a lot of restoration work that occurs on the Kenai River and other rivers in Alaska. They're trying to, get away from riprap and things like that. So they're using a lot of organic materials and engineered logs and things like that in the bank. And then you need to get people up and over the bank and down to the river or down to where their boats are. And they've been using these things called elevated light penetrating boardwalks and stairs to do that job. So they let the sun in, stuff can grow underneath those stairs and boardwalks, and yet you can get people up and over the top of this restoration stuff that you've been working on. And that's a kind of a clever use of technology. Again, you have to be willing to live with the consequences of that, which is a lot of metal and development in your site. So if it's a primitive site, it might not fit sort of in a recreation opportunities. point of view. An issue that we discovered after the database was developed is that we were collecting information about the distance between parking and the ramp or ramp and the river. But the distance that most matters is the distance you have to carry stuff from your vehicle to the river or to the boat that you're about to put down a slide. We ended up calling this idea the schlepping distance. And this is an example of a site that has a pretty good version of that. It's well organized. It's not got a lot of room where you put the boats in. So you get to go there with your trailer, your boat on a trailer, or in the car and get it off the vehicle and into the river and unload your stuff pretty quickly. But then you've got to park separate from that. But the staging area is big enough so that there is not any real difference between the top of the ramp and the bottom of it. So it's kind of a well-organized place, a small schlepping distance. And that's something that we think should be paid attention when you're developing new launches. Another example of a sort of a built facility. This is kind of like a ramp and a slide put together. This is a place that's used by kayaks and canoes. It's in South Carolina and it's on a tidal river. So they're looking for a place that, a dock that floats, so it can go up and down with the tide, which I think is a few feet anyway. And since most people are in kayaks, you need kind of a way for people to get into their kayaks without flipping over. There's a lot of neophytes, recreational kayaks, not a lot of high skill people here. So they've got a nice little launch there that helps people get in and out of their boats and also allows them to sort of store their boats, whether they're coming in or out. This is both a put in and a takeout. And finally, the award for probably the most unusual launch, which is, we call it the Mechanical Advantage Award, is a place called Ward's Ferry. It's on the Tuolumne River in California. It's a class 4-5 run, a lot of commercial use, a lot of private use. When you get down to the bottom, you're you're pretty long ways up to the highway, and depending on what the reservoir level is doing, it can be a pretty serious climb up a pretty gnarly trail and road to get you up to the highway. And the way the outfitters have fixed this, outfitters are pretty good at figuring out efficiencies, is they brought down cranes and they literally lift the boats up from the surface of the water up above. The problem is that the only people that get to use these cranes are the outfitter that hired it, because of liability laws in the states and whatnot. Even if you're a private user and even if you have a lot of money that you're willing to pay those guys who have the crane right there, they're not willing to let you use their crane. So you have to hump the thing up the hill anyway. As a final note, we would like to expand the database in the future. And one of the ways that we think that we ought to do that is by making it a little less difficult to put in new entries. So we're thinking about streamlining the database form that is used to put in a new database. And we're hoping to find some interest from other agencies and whatnot to expand it. And hopefully we can get this database even larger in the future. And we look forward to letting you know about that. In the meantime, you can refer back to this slide, which will get you to our report and a gallery of about, I think it's 80 or 100 slides with other examples of launches, as well as a link to the access planning guide, which is kind of the deductive way of going about designing launches and things of that nature. And with that, I guess we'll